Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we're here with Jami Curl. Her new book, newish book, is Baking Gold. Our good friend and partner, Isabel Iman, will be doing the interview. And I just want to do a few PSAs. We have so much going on at the store, but with the new COVID restrictions, we're not going to do our holiday event, holiday hours until 11, the day after Thanksgiving. We were going to start them Friday, but we're not doing them. We are doing a holiday night market, and you can check the website for that schedule. And then we're still regularly scheduled our Stitch and Bitch, and then the workshop hours. And then there's an Emma sweater class starting next Sunday. So thank you, everybody, for showing up. And I'm going to turn it over to Isabel Iman.
Yay. Thanks so much, Christine. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. So I am super excited to be chatting with Jami Curl tonight. And I'll just share a brief introduction before we get started. So Jami is truly a confectionery connoisseur, as well as a master storyteller and a literary advocate. And she's the author of 2 cookbooks, Candy is Magic and Baking Gold, like Christine mentioned. And her work has been featured in numerous publications. And so tonight we're going to be chatting about how all of these different skills overlap in her work, all things candy making, and what she's looking forward to most for this year's holiday baking season. You ready to get started, Jami?
I am ready. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so excited. So I wanted to get started by chatting a little bit about you before you came to Portland. It just seems like you are this creative force and just have this eye for innovation. And I feel like that pairs so beautifully with what Portland is known for. I'm curious if that culture is what brought you to Portland.
Yeah, when it was it was almost like folklore at this point on how I came here. But I was at a kitchen table with my best friend. We were trying to figure out where we were going to move to after we both graduated from college. I'm from Ohio originally. And so we were sitting at her mother's kitchen table, looking at the newspaper, our local newspaper, and we turned to the travel section, and there was an article that said Portland, Oregon, a city raised on coffee, beer, and books. And we were like, that sounds like the promised land. And so we just made the decision to come to Portland based on that alone. And neither of us had ever been here ever before. And so we loaded up the car and came to Portland. We lived in a Motel 6 that is in Lake Oswego for the first week that we were here, and then found an apartment downtown and have both been here since then. So
that's
now,
amazing.
My friend, her name is Stephanie, and she owns a little store over on Southeast Belmont called Noun, a person's place for things.
I've heard of Noun. I love Noun.
Yeah. And that is, so we have both, and we got here and then both sort of caught that entrepreneurial bug and started businesses and have been kicking things around since then. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so it definitely, it fulfilled your expectations.
Yeah. And coming here then, Portland was, not a food mecca, how it is now. And it was an interesting place to just do anything that you wanted. It was easy to rent an apartment. It was easy to find a place to do something creative. There were lots of people doing really cool things, and there still are. But back then it seemed like a little bit easier to get ingrained into that sort of creative culture.
Mm-hmm. And what year was that when you came here?
It was 100 years ago in 1997.
Okay, yeah.
So a while ago. It's funny because I still sometimes refer to Ohio as home, and then I think, I guess that I've lived here almost longer than I lived there, even though that's where I'm from. So, but I still we go home to Ohio in the summer, which is so funny. I see somebody in the chat went to Miami in Ohio. I went to Ohio University in Athens, and one of my best friends went to Miami, actually. So hi, Liz.
That's awesome. So I wanted to know too, I'm so curious what your relationship was like to candy and sweets as a child, and how you decided to pursue that professionally.
I have had a very strong sweet tooth since I was a kid, and I was raised by my mother would, buy excess Easter candy and hide it in the house to eat throughout the year. My grandmother was really, really into chocolate and made tons and tons of chocolates every Christmas.
Oh, wow.
And my other aunt was, there's every photo of me with these three women is like they're giving me a fudgesicle, or here's a piece of chocolate. There's all these pictures of me in a driveway eating cake. And on my, when I was 9 years old on Mother's Day, I gave my mom a card that said, you have loved me for 9 whole years, and you've been so nice to me and taken me shopping and done all these nice things for me. And so I want to return the favor to you, and I will bring you everything that is great: candy, cookies, and cake. That's what I said in this card. And so since I actually include in Candy is Magic, my first book, a little illustration of the exact card that I made for her, because I still have it. So, and it was kind of this sort of guiding light that I have just always been into it. And, when I first came to Portland, I didn't do any kind of food job. I did a lot of food jobs in college back in Ohio. But when I first came to Portland, I worked at a bank. I worked in marketing at the Oregon State Bar. I worked in an engineering firm as a marketer, and started grad school for public administration because I was working at the state bar and kind of got interested in the inner workings of government, which is a bizarre, now that I think about it, I would not have lasted. But it was during that time that I was baking wedding cakes on the weekends for friends and, different customers or clients, and just thought maybe I could rent a little space and open a bakery. And so that's essentially how sort of the professional side of it started. I just decided to do it.
Yeah.
And I did. Yeah. And and that was, a lot of the recipes that I used when I first started St. Cupcake, I developed or would call my grandma for help with, because she's always been such a great baker. So it was just very, telling the story to you now, it seems like it was very organic and natural. And I think that I have that advantage of being far away from it now. So it feels easier in my mind than it was in reality, but it just seems to be this thing that sort of step by step things fell into place, and it just sort of happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from hearing all of that, it sounds like, you weave storytelling so beautifully into all of your work. And it's clear just in that reflection too, that story is so ingrained in who you are as a baker. But I'm curious, how do you personally see all the different focuses of your work overlapping?
Well, I think that it is true. I would say it kind of comes back to teaching, and that had a lot to do with whether it's writing a recipe for a book or teaching a coworker how to make something, or whatever it is. But it sort of starts with, that's all storytelling. It's the story of the recipe, or it's the story of how to, when to check something, how to know if you smell something in the air, if you can feel something when you touch it, that's, whatever it is that it sort of weaves itself into the story. And so books have always been a really powerful source of rest, but also energy for me. And so I have always admired and loved the way that people can put thoughts into words. And I just have always sort of tried to do that. I was an English major, which really helped in that respect too. But it just has been, books and reading have been a huge part of it. And I think that if it were up to me and not, an editor on a cookbook, it would be more story than it would have been recipes. But I do love that side of it. And that's one of the things I like about teaching too, is just that you can take the time to pause and tell the story as to how something came together, or to help people kind of create their own story around a recipe. And that's
Absolutely.
The other thing about food too, is that food is such a holds so many memories, and what things taste like and what things smell like. And I think that those themselves kind of form their own stories.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like too, just you sharing a little bit about your family and your mother and your grandmother, it sounds like story was kind of an inherent part of the cooking and baking process for you. Yeah. So getting a little bit deeper into candy. So obviously your candy goes far away from the heavily processed and manufactured candy that we're buying at the store.
Yes.
And it's an art. You make it into an art. It's beautiful. But I'm curious what inspired you to pursue candy in that way?
I was had been baking a lot of things and had a lot of ingredients around that go into baked goods, flour and sugar and that kind of stuff, but then also all types of fruit and chocolate and all of these things. And so it was more of a thing like, what could I do today that's not making another scone or trying to figure out another type of cookie or, any number of baked good things. And I thought, what if I just tried to make caramel and we could wrap it and see if anybody buys it. So it kind of started really easily, like that. And it wasn't the kind of thing where I was like, I'll go out and get a book or look up online how to make candy. I just looked around with the ingredients that I had and obviously knew how to make caramel because we used it for, cake layers or toppings or whatever it was. So it sort of started like that really naturally. And because I didn't have any fake ingredients around, no fake ingredients went into the candy. So it just sort of started like that. So it was caramels at first. And then I thought, well, we could expand like the flavors and make different flavors of caramel. And then from there, that worked and people kind of were into it and it tasted good. And we made caramel apples and did all these other sort of extensions of caramel. And I thought, well, we could try to make hard candy. And so that started with strawberries because it was a strawberry season and we were using strawberries and a bunch of baked goods. And so I just was like, well, knowing what you know about food and baking and sugar, you would need to get the moisture out of the strawberries. So I just sliced them and roasted them to sort of dehydrate them a little bit, and then pureed them, and then cooked it with some sugar and water to make hard candy. And that worked. You just cooked it to the hard crack stage, just like you would if you were doing like sugar work for baking, and it all just built like that. And so and it was like one thing after another, where then it was like, well, what if we tried to make something that was like Starburst? And so it just all came about in that really organic way. I mean, during that time, it was massive amounts of candy eaten, so much. And I do love it, but even then I was like, this is good. We should all probably not eat this. But I was like constantly walking around the bakery like, try this. And people are like, I just ate like a cinnamon roll and a scone, and now you want me to eat, whatever it is. So it all kind of happened just working in general to try to figure out how to do it. But the fact that everything had good ingredients and sort of like bakery inspired ingredients, that was because that is what was around. And that's just how I sort of taught myself how to do it.
Interesting. So that kind of like bridges a little bit into my next question, this idea of like too much sugar. I'm curious, like how do you create balance in your flavors so that it's not like cloyingly sweet?
I think that it's because where the flavor has to come from is something that's more natural than just like crappy sugar. And a lot of candies that are, mainstream manufactured candies, they use ingredients that are engineered to be sweeter than sugar, even in a lot of the stuff that they're making. And so it just came to the point where I knew that I didn't want to make something that somebody would eat and be like, oh, that's too much for me. So it became this sort of balancing act of, maybe in a caramel, we'll use sea salt and honey with the sugar to try to balance it out. Right. So it became this sort of thing to just try to figure it out. And in hard candy and things like that, the goal was always to use the minimum amount of sugar that we could to get the recipe to work, so that then the sort of flavor of the strawberry would be what was really showcased, rather than the first taste of it being like, this is so sweet. To have it be sort of to taste like an actual strawberry instead of like a dum-dum that tastes like strawberry flavor.
Right. Yeah. So then how do you come up with new flavors? It sounds a little bit from what you're describing, like you seem to center a little bit upon like single ingredients, but I'm curious if you find inspiration in other things.
Oh yeah, we there was all sorts of stuff that we had I love this one caramel that's in Candy is Magic that is coffee, orange, and smoked salt flavored, and that was inspired by a drink that they have at the Vietnamese restaurant in Portland called Look Lac, and they make this drink that has those flavors in it. And so we thought maybe we could turn that into a candy. And then there's a lot of other stuff. We did maple and black pepper and lots of honey and different nuts combined. So lots, some flavors that were combined. And I think that those come from knowing that you had this core flavor that you want to highlight, but then thinking through like what flavors could be complementary to those things to add layers. And I think that one of the things that sets those recipes that are in Candy is Magic apart is that it's a really good guidebook for complex flavors, but then there's an element of that book that teaches you how to sort of design your own flavor as well by layering different things together. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite flavor combination for candy?
There is a recipe in Candy is Magic for an olive oil, sea salt, and chocolate lollipop that is very, very, very delicious. So that's one of my favorite things to make because it's super fun to make and it also is very delicious. And then I love honey and hazelnuts together in candy, like in a caramel. And I love like blackberry with citrus, like blackberry and tangerine or blackberry and orange together, which there's a gumdrop recipe in Candy is Magic for that, which I love too. So it depends upon, I think, season. And, you know, like right now, I just want super rich, pumpkin-y, you know, fall stuff.
All of that, yes. So speaking of Candy is Magic, it seems like the aim of the book is really to make candy making accessible for home cooks. I'm curious, are there like any steps of the process in candy making that you're really focused on to make that accessible for home cooks?
I definitely tried to, and that's a great question, to figure out ways to break candy making down so that you didn't need a ton of equipment. So that you could make a caramel by eye rather than constantly worrying about sticking a thermometer in a pot and checking the temperature, because caramel is kind of a tricky thing. You're kind of swirling the pot so the spots in the pot don't burn. And then if you're also trying to stick a thermometer, it just gets tricky. So kind of do it to teach by eye rather than worrying about a thermometer. And then, you know, candy making can get very technical really fast in terms of the types of equipment that you need. So the first focus of that was, well, you know, I didn't want people to have to invest a ton of money in equipment to be able to just make some candy. So a lot of the stuff, like you can make lollipops just using a non-stick baking mat and some sticks, you know, and you just have a regular pot and a Pyrex measuring cup with a spout so you can pour the candy out on the sticks. And that, you know, I have taught tons and tons of people how to make hard candy just doing it that way. So there's that. And then the idea that the recipes are accessible if you can just go to the regular grocery store and you don't have to worry about, you know, finding really super special ingredients to do any of it. And that, I think, in terms of making it as easy as possible were the first two steps, because in general, I have found that people aren't super comfortable cooking sugar. And there's something that has scared people away from making caramel. I don't know if it's that.
Guilty. I've had so many like situations where I've tried to make caramel and it just turns into a hard rock that like I can't do anything with, you know.
And that, I think, is the baseline that I used for making those recipes in particular as easy as possible, for sure. Because it's that feedback I got consistently all the time. And even in helping coworkers get up to speed and making recipes and that kind of thing, caramel was always a hang up for people for some reason. So I just tried to work it to make it easy.
Yeah. So did you start writing the book with a favorite candy that you wanted to specifically create a recipe for, or did you sort of like discover a favorite along the way or through the process of writing the book?
I think that in general, I wanted to really shine a light on making hard candy at home, because it's so cool to turn something that's liquid into something that's that hard and solid and, you know, like can shatter when you crack it on the countertop. So I like that part of it. And I think to demystify the role of the ingredients in a hard candy recipe was a really fun thing to try to explain to people. And, you know, the hard candy you can do, whether it's a lollipop or, you know, one of my favorite parts of that book is that I made a lollipop that had a chewy center that was fruit flavored. So like the canned hard candy is tangerine and there's a chewy center that's cherry flavored. So coming up with the how to write that recipe, and B, how to explain it in words, and then how to photograph it so that people could do it at home, because you have so many different types of learners. And that's what is so interesting about writing a book, is that the balance of how to explain how to do something in words for the people who can learn that way or who like to learn that way, versus explaining something in photographs, because there's a whole another group of people who can learn that way. And then another element of Candy is Magic, especially, is that we did a ton of illustrations by hand-drawn illustrations that an artist did to help sort of support the different ways of doing stuff. And so that was all, that part I loved. So I would say that all of the various ways you can use hard candy, that was like the highlight of starting off that book for sure.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I don't think, I mean, I have plenty of other cookbooks that don't pay quite as much attention to really like the pedagogical like approach of creating something. And I think that's incredible. Like your book is truly like not only like incredibly inspiring, but an education on like what it is to make candy. Yeah. And were you very focused on that throughout the process of writing it?
Well, yes. And there's a layer. I'm a very detail-oriented, obsessive type person. I hate the idea of putting something out into the world that someone wouldn't find usable, you know? And I think that there's only so much that I can assume that that somebody knows how to do. And so without talking down to somebody who is skilled in the kitchen, and without leaving out a ton of information for somebody who's sort of new to doing this, I just always tried to find that balance while understanding my own personality of, I like, as you can probably tell, because I just keep talking, I like to give as much help and details and, and this, you could do this and look for this and do this. And it's just like who I am. And so I think that the books, and Candy is Magic in particular, are a good way. It's like a happy medium of what the publisher could allow page number wise, and like me thinking that it was sufficient to try to explain to people how to do it. So yes.
So switching it over a little bit to baking gold. So the concept of that book is exploring the capacities of these master doughs and batters. And so I'm curious what the goals were with that. Was it to make baking a streamlined process? Was it this idea of like accessibility similar to Candy's Magic? What were your goals with that?
Yes to both of those things. So, you know, when I was coming up with the idea of baking gold, what I kept coming back to was that I loved the idea that you could do more than one thing with a recipe, for example. So, you know, one of the things that I hate about recipes sometimes is that some recipe will call for 2 tablespoons of something that comes in a whole can, you know. And I hate that idea that I won't use the rest of this for anything. I only needed 2 tablespoons of this for this thing. And so I like the idea of a recipe that can be used in multiple ways, so that you can learn how to do this one thing and then turn it into all of these other things. And that the inspiration for that in Baking Gold came from Candy is Magic, because it was like, if you just learn how to make this basic caramel, you can make 40 different types of caramel if you can think those flavors up.
Yeah.
So starting Baking Gold, I thought I could group the recipes by type and then work from that type to a master recipe. So it was some trial and error and figuring it out. But then as I was going through it, I did keep coming back to the fact that I could just break this down and make it a normal cookbook and do recipe by recipe how to do it. But the publisher definitely wanted a hook, you know?
Yeah.
So it had to have something different that readers hadn't sort of seen, so that it wasn't just another book of sort of these recipes. So I think that that's kind of how it started. And then I worked, you know, to make it unique and of me rather than just like a normal baking book. So it was a good mix of what I learned from Candy is Magic, how I like to cook and bake personally, and then kind of a little sprinkle on top of what the publisher needed.
Yeah. Do you feel like with having that sort of foundation and that template of the idea of the book that you still got to play around with? I mean, the flavors in Baking Gold are so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is where, and that's where like somebody who has the book at home can go wild too, is that and it's almost like you learn how to do these two things and then you have unlimited, freedom to make whatever you want from there. And that's what I like, is to show a couple of examples or samples of how to do it, but then like you could come up with so many cool things to bake just because you have this, knowledge of how to do this one thing. And that part I love for people. Definitely. Just to be able to make it their own. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So we have a question from the chat. Let's see. Liz asked, what were some of your favorite books from childhood that featured food or sweets?
Well, my early memories of reading is in Nancy Drew books when they would eat hot fudge sundaes together. And I don't know if anyone remembers that. Nancy Drew had this one friend and she always was talking about like hot fudge sundaes. And I just think in my mind, I just love that. And, I love food imagery in general. And this is, this book that I'm about to say isn't from my childhood, but it is a book for kids, and it's called Louisiana's Way Home. And it's by Kate DiCamillo. She wrote, I'm looking at it over my shoulder. She wrote all the Mercy Watson books, which is about that little pig. And she wrote the Winn-Dixie book about the dog.
Right.
And so Louisiana's Way Home is a book that's just so beautifully written about a girl who's sort of parentless and trying to find her way in the world, and just the care and love that the other characters show her through food in the book. I love that. I love reading about it. But for me, really formative when I was a kid were the hot fudge sundaes and Nancy Drew.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like even then, like as a child, that intersection between your literary interests and your food interests really coincided.
Yes. And that's, I think, and even reading now, I just love when an author can sort of weave that food imagery into stories. Oh, Liz is saying she's going to check out Louisiana. Sorry, you should definitely. Liz, it's so good. It's heartbreaking and beautiful. It's just a wonderful book in general, in addition to the food, isn't it? And like Lori Colwin, I love her writing.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
She's a brilliant writer to begin with, but the way that she talks about food is just so magnificent.
So amazing. I think you and I were emailing a couple of months back.
We did.
You were reading her, and I had never read her at that point yet, but I had been hearing other people talking about her writing. Obviously, she was writing years ago. But I finished Home Cooking a couple weeks ago. Oh my gosh. Like,
it's so good. Everybody needs to read it.
It was the book I needed to read right now. I feel like it's the book we all need to read all the time. Like,
yep.
Yeah, the way she speaks about cooking in the humor that she weaves through it is very like self-deprecating, but also relatable. It's so good. I love it.
And it's like, where would we be without books, especially right now? Yeah. I can't. It's just. Yep.
Absolutely. Christine says, I love you guys, my people. Absolutely. Books and food. Books and food. That's all we need. But so transitioning to this time of year, the holidays are coming up. It's getting super rainy, which also means super cozy in Portland. Yep. And so we're just going to be inside cooking all the time. I'm curious if you have any holiday baking traditions that you follow year after year.
Yes, my big one. Well, Thanksgiving is always Thanksgiving. Sometimes I'll make a pie. Sometimes I won't. I kind of, as soon as November hits, it's almost like I skip to the Christmas season. And that's because I every year have this cookie party, which a lot of people have cookie parties. I know I'm not original in this, but what I love about it is that I have a big, huge mixer, like a bakery, like a big mixer in my kitchen, which I'm very lucky to have. And I will make pounds and pounds and pounds of dough, so much of it. And then I get it out of the mixer and I roll it out immediately. And then I just keep these dough sheets stacked in my freezer. And
Love
then
it.
I do this weeks ahead. So I freeze it. And then when the cookie party rolls around, I bake hundreds and hundreds of cookies and then make pounds and pounds and pounds of buttercream. And then I buy undyed sprinkles and then I dye them all by hand.
Oh my gosh.
And then I do all of this. Are you ready? For 4 people. That's the total attendance of the cookie party. So everybody has dozens and dozens and dozens of cookies because they're already cut and baked. I do it all ahead. And so you just get to come over and we just sit down for the afternoon and everybody just decorates cookies. And it's the highlight of my year every year. I love it more than eating them. I love that process of doing it. And then I feel like the people that I do it for are always year after year so appreciative. It's become their favorite thing. You know, it's just like a gift that I get to give, but the act of it is one of my favorite, my highlight of my year. Yes.
Oh, well, I mean, everybody has cookie parties, but like nobody has cookie parties like that. That sounds amazing.
It's the best. It's really fun. I feel really happy to do it. And this year, you know, I don't know how it's going to go down, but it might be that I deliver the package of cookies to their house rather than have people over, which is a bummer, but we're all adjusting and making changes. It's fine.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because that's what we're all feeling right now. And, you know, again, it's this time of year where food is really an expression of our love and our desire to be close to people. So have you thought a little bit about how you're going to go about that?
I think it is, you know, at our house, obviously, I have had a little bit, this isn't sort of necessarily about the holiday season, but during the time of COVID, I've almost gone the opposite. I know that so many people are baking right now for comfort. And even, you know, before the weather turned in Portland, we were talking about flour shortages and stuff before the event started. And I kind of went the opposite way where I didn't want to bake anything at all. There have been like entire weeks that have gone by where I haven't even thought to bake something, which is just so strange to me. And so as we've shifted to the holidays, I think that one of the things I love about the end of Baking Gold is that there's all these ideas in there for putting packages together for people and sort of dropping them off at their house. And I had been talking to my I have a child and a 13-year-old, and we've been talking together about putting packages like that together to bring them to people. You know, we don't necessarily have to see them, but just so that we get to still share that feeling. So I'm looking forward to that because I feel like at least it's something, you know.
Absolutely. Well,
it's a
your
bummer
books are
of
like
time, but it's, you know.
Well, there are small things that we
to
can do like that too. That still shares that. And I was just going to say the recipes from your books are like the perfect things to put in care packages and to share with other people.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those were actually all of my questions tonight, but I feel like I could chat with you forever about baking and all the good stuff. I mean, that's what I want to talk about all the time. Like
there's so many delicious things.
So many delicious things. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing. Do you see what Liz is saying? I know. And that's one of the reasons why I have held off on baking a little bit is because I know that I'll eat it. Like I could do the whole trick of like, okay, so make the cookie dough and scoop it out and then freeze scoops and then just bake off 5 cookies at a time or whatever. But I mean, like you were saying about making cakes and things, if we make the cake, we're going to eat the cake, unfortunately. And so like not being able to.
I love Liz's comment on the cookies, just eating the cookie dough. Definitely have done that. Yep. Oh my goodness.
That's so funny.
Oh,
hi, Christine.
Oh.
Liz, thanks for being a chatter.
Oh yeah, I love it.
So much fun.
Liz and I, we both are on the board. Liz is president, actually, of the board, the Boosters, our business association. And so she would always bring baked goods to everything. She was our baker. And now she can't distribute. She would stop by my store and give me baked goods, but now no
I still think,
Yeah.
Liz, I still think about those beet and carrot fritters that you made for Cookbook
Oh,
Club
yum.
from, oh my gosh, those were so good. I was tempted to make them myself the other day when I had beets, but beets are just such an undertaking, you know.
Actually, beets, Jami, how do you feel about
Yes.
beets dyeing red velvet cake?
Yeah, I love that. I love those natural dyes. We used beet for all the pinks and reds at Quinn. We used beet for all of that. And when I was little, my mom would make a red velvetish cake that had more cocoa powder in it than it should. So it was really more like a chocolate cake that also had beet in it. And she would shred the beets and then bake it into the cake that way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you don't mind pink hands, shred those beets.
I love beets. They're mine.
I love beets too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Oh my
They're so good for you.
Yes. Especially in red velvet cake.
Yeah. They're excellent for you in cake.
It makes it health food.
That's right.
Yes.
Vera says rubber gloves, no red hand.
Yep.
It's true.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jami and
Isabel.
This was so much fun. I was saying, I'm glad to have a night dedicated to talking about sweet things. It's so nice.
No, I hope that it was a bright spot. It's a definite bright spot for me. I think we all need as many bright spots as we can get.
It's
lately.
true.
So thank
Definitely
you.
True.
Yeah.
And we have a bright spot. Our Isabel just got a promotion. So this is possibly our last Cookbook Club with
Silver
her
lining.
moderator.
Silver lining.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
wonderful.
Yeah. We'll see what January brings. I'm hoping maybe we can rope her in for something.
I love doing this. Yes. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, food is so magical, right? The way that it brings people together. And, you know, I might cry. Oh, goodness. My grandmother, I had an Italian grandmother, and we always had big meals. She was not a baker. She didn't do cookies. You know, we had lasagna, antipasta, all those things. Yeah. But I learned the ritual of food, how important it is. And it's so hard in this time of COVID to not have that ritual of gathering. I mean, particularly for me, because you know, I love Cookbook Club. So yeah, COVID this week has caught up with me. Yeah. But thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, thank you for all that you do, Christine. Not only food brings people together, but as we chat about books bring people together, and you bring up the community. So thank you.
I had no idea you were such a bookie.
Oh yeah, I love it. It's I mean, you know, I like sweets and stuff, but I love books. Yeah.
Are you reading anything fun right now?
You know what I'm reading? I'm reading that book, $1 Billion Loser, about the guy who started WeWork. It's so good.
Oh, I did not. I need to read that. Oh my gosh.
Because you know what I loved? I loved the book about the lady who started Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes.
Did you listen to that podcast?
Oh, I did. I loved it.
So good. Oh gosh.
But I think that I tried to dissect why it's not that I am like relishing other people's major failures or like, because I have had my own failures. I think that what I love about those stories is that the underlying fundamental of it is teams that fall apart. And teams that don't live up to what they need to be in order to like provide a functioning foundation for a company. And as soon as there's sort of a crack in that, then everything falls apart. And I just love something about that resonates with me. I just love that as a through line through stories. And you can trace it back to like major disasters, like, you know, Deepwater Horizon, that oil rig that blew up is because every person on that rig, they couldn't function as a team. And they had egos that got in the way. They couldn't support each other. They weren't vulnerable. They didn't open up. And then that thing blew up because of a series of basically preventable incidences that all come back to teamwork. So anyway, I love those stories.
I need to read that. When all of that news was coming out, I was glued to the New York Times coverage of it. So I'm going to pick that up.
It's really very good. And then I just finished reading Transcendent Kingdom by Yagesi, which is so good. Oh, it was so beautiful. Christine, have you read it yet?
I haven't read it. I read Homegoing.
Oh yeah, I loved that book too. I loved it. Yeah. And then I also just finished rereading The Family Fang by Kevin Wilson. That book is like familiar people saying familiar things. It's so funny and so odd and so amusing. I kind of come back and read it when I need, lighthearted stuff. Anyway, yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm noticing lighthearted is a trend. Political books have sort of taken a nosedive.
Oh, I would guess.
Yeah, but even sort of like the heavy duty fiction, like Florida and Memory Police, they're like, what do you have that's light?
I'm definitely reading light right now. I just started Nick Hornby's Just Like You.
Yeah.
So lovely. I am loving it right now.
Yeah. David Sedaris has a new book. The Best of Me.
Reading about it.
Yeah. If you want super light, I love Erin Morgenstern. She wrote The Night Circus. Her new book is RT, which is a book lover's book. I could talk about books all day, as you well know. But yeah.
Love it.
Love it.
They're my solace. And cooking is my,
Yep. I know.
Absolutely.
Exactly. We are really among friends right now, for sure.
This is lovely. What a lovely evening.
I hope we get to see you soon in person.
Yeah. Oh, in person would be so great. I can't wait for those days.
I mean, Liz, I'm sure is going to ask me for your contact info for the the next Cake Luck.
Yes, I would do that. I'm in. Count me in.
Would love to do that. It's so
you can't come. You live in Alberta now.
Can I be an honorary St. John's?
I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I try to get everybody to move to St. John's.
We were so close.
Close. Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep blabbering. Thank you guys all for showing up.
Thank you.
This was amazing. So much fun.
We were crowns.
Okay. Sold again.
I love it.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, thank you, everybody. Isabel, thank you again for being our host. And this was like super great.
Yeah, it was so great. Thank you. I appreciate you both so much. Thank you for your time and your efforts and your support of books and reading and food. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like to say I have a cookbook problem.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. I'm going to sign us off, but thank you.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Have a good night.